Good evening, Brian, and welcome to the Lodge Hope of Karachi number 337 and our lockdown lecture series, meeting number 78. It's a great pleasure, as ever, to welcome you along here on a Tuesday evening. Brian, can I remind you of the Grand Lodge of Scotland guidelines? Please have a recognisable name in the screen. For example, Jim Faculty, not iPad bracket to close bracket. Can I also ask you to keep your video going as long as your bandwidth allows? If your bandwidth does play up, Brian, just please drop me a little message in the chat so I know that you've disappeared. Please also sign our virtual tile on our Facebook page, and that would be very much appreciated. Brian, thank you to all those who participated in our online poll about the future of this lecture series. Some of you will have seen my post on our pages over the weekend in consultation with our secretary and looking at what's happening in around the province of Fife and Kinross and the wider our sister provinces. We felt that it seems that many lodges are going back slowly. It's maybe members only, business only meetings, and we felt that we still got a place for at least the next couple of months to provide this weekly lockdown lecture series. We do not want to compete with regular meetings, and that was always the stated intention, and take Brian away from the opportunity to enjoy their masonry face to face. We're going to continue to review the situation on a weekly basis, but the plan now is to ensure that we have got a speaker on a weekly basis up until the 28th of December, and that will be the middle lecture in between Christmas and New Year. That will be the last one that we're planning on. If things change in the future, we will review it and we'll let you know, and we'll announce that on our Facebook pages. That being said, Brian, it gives me the great delight to welcome along this evening a real Kent brother. Many will know Brother Peter Taylor, recently appointed Provincial Grand Master of Forfarshire, one of the most unluckiest provinces in Scotland, Brian. It was nearly Fife and Kinross. And Peter's going to talk to us this evening and take us on a stroll around the 7 liberal arts and sciences. Brother Peter Taylor, the virtual floor is yours, sir.
Thank you, Brother Gordon, and many thanks to the Lodge for their kind invitation to come along and give this talk this evening. This talk was originally given by Brother Richard D. Marcus of the George Washington Lodge, Whitefish Bay, Wisconsin. I mean, I've taken his work and modified it quite considerably. And interestingly enough, one of the reasons why I picked this talk is the number of George Washington Lodge is 337. So there you go. So I thought that was quite interesting. So what I'll do now is try and share my screen. So hopefully you can see some of the slides and we'll make a start.
Yeah, that's come up fine, Peter. Thank you.
So something like that. That's good, eh? So let's hope you enjoy this, brethren. Throughout our lives, at least our Masonic lives, we have heard of the liberal arts and sciences. But until we are presented with them in the second degree tracing board, in that lecture, most of us may only have had a vague notion of what they consist of. The Fellowcraft degree charges a Freemason to study the liberal arts and sciences, which are, as we all should know, grammar, rhetoric, logic, arithmetic, geometry, music, and astronomy. But when we study the historical background for this list, we'll uncover layers of Masonic meanings for us in each of the 7 areas of knowledge. So part of the original list date back to ancient Greece, but by medieval times, the complete list had become central to educators and scholars. The following remarkable woodblock print symbolically captures the relationship of the knowledge to crafts. This print is German And this is from about AD 1500. And it shows the goddess Sophia, shows a goddess holding a book and a rod. She's called Wisdom or Sophia. We see wisdom's lifeblood pouring into all of the arts and crafts when they're all drawn as young men. All knowledge is united in the illustration. We can see painters, architects, musicians, and soldiers all receiving Sophia's wisdom. The love of wisdom, or the philo or filio of Sophia, is the root of the word philosophy. Proverbs 9:1 says, "Wisdom hath built herself a house. She hath hewn her out 7 pillars." Now, religious scholars have long speculated upon the 7 pillars of wisdom. Wisdom is poured out to 7 vocations or callings, and wisdom is also seen presiding over branches of knowledge, which leads us to a second woodblock. This is also a woodblock print, which is also German and from around 1500 as well. Now, this one includes clear words representing the 7 liberal arts and sciences. And you can see around the bottom, you have grammar, arithmetic, music, geometry, etc. And once again, she is holding a book and a rod, which is a symbol of a teacher, and held by a 3-winged wisdom. She oversees 7 maidens in this one, as opposed to 7 men. In AD 420, Marcianus Capella in Carthage wrote an allegory of the Phoebus Apollo, god of the sun, presenting the 7 liberal arts as maids to his bride Philology, or lover of words. Thereafter, artists have illustrated the liberal arts and sciences as maids. The maids congregate around wisdom, and knowledge is drawn within a circle, similar to that woodblock that you're looking at. Above wisdom are morals and theology. In the bottom corners are Aristotle and possibly Plato, but the central figures are the 7 liberal arts and sciences. The winding stair in youth, manhood, and age, they are the 3 stages of our lives. And likewise, the 3 degrees of masonry progress from youth to manhood to maturity. The end of the apprentice degree builds a foundation of brotherly love, relief, and truth. And the fellowcraft degree leads us towards successful manhood with an attentive ear, an instructive tongue, and a faithful breast. The master mason degree teaches us, amongst many other things, that time and patience will accomplish all things. We advance in life as we climb this winding stair. We cannot see too far ahead because we can't see around corners, of course, and our progress requires courage to press on as we grow and mature. We first encounter the 3 steps in masonry. Thereafter, we master our 5 senses as we observe our world. As we climb the steps of the 7 liberal arts and sciences, likewise, education is a process of stepping up a winding stair. Primary school teaches us to read and write simple ideas. We progress up the steps of schooling to abstract concepts and ideas. There must be many fields of knowledge that could have been listed: history, chemistry, literature, yet this list is commended to our consideration. So why grammar? Why rhetoric? We may well ask, why this list and not others? The phrase "the liberal arts" comes from the Latin artes liberalis. Liber is translated both as free and book. Much of the well-educated in antiquity disliked work. If you were indentured as an apprentice, you were not free to study what you wanted. You had to do what was assigned to you. The artes liberalis were vocational studies aimed for an economic purpose, such as being a stonemason. So it's intriguing that speculative masonry encourages us to study the liberal arts and sciences. The history of the 7 liberal arts and sciences is very intricate, but chiefly Pythagoras, Plato, and St. Augustine play key roles in framing it. Pythagoras, illustrated here, was not only a great mathematician and a philosopher, but he was also a master Greek theologian. His students in the academy looked for connections between geometry and the divine, and his disciples sought relationships in music, arithmetic, and astronomy. Pythagoras is associated with the last four in the list of the several liberal arts and sciences. He was at his peak about 520 BC. About 400 BC, Plato wrote of the importance of education for citizens in the Republic. Plato emphasized logic, philosophy, and dialect. For Plato, logic represented our highest cognitive faculty. To see both sides of an argument, the pro and the con, is to understand it. St. Augustine of Hippo left behind 5 million words that still exist today. Though he lived in the 3rd century AD, he was the greatest teacher of rhetoric in the known world. He held that if one wished to defend truth, one must be eloquent to refute falsehood through the power of oratory. He filled out the 7 liberal arts and sciences with his emphasis on grammar and rhetoric. So there is wisdom in the order of the items in the list. Teachers and scholars have found these 7 and their general order to be of great utility. Homeschoolers today are returning to this list to start with grammar and rhetoric in their education. As infants, we are unable to speak. We must learn words to describe everything. Words organize our thoughts. Language is essential for learning. As we progress up the winding stairs, we learn to speak with eloquence and grace, which is rhetoric. We learn to use logic to make our arguments persuasive and true. We advance up the lessons to higher levels of arithmetic, geometry, and music. These require abstract thinking and greater levels of concentration. As we mature in life, we gain perspective and wisdom as we enjoy the glorious works of creation, the stars and planets, astronomy, and the divine. The order of these topics was developed over 1,000 years, and they continue to attract attention today. The trivium comes from the Latin for 3 vias, or roads. The first 3 of the 7 liberal arts and sciences represents a crossroads or an intersection where the public meets. We could call it the public square, where the public meet to discuss the usual topics of the day. Those who excel are quickly remembering common experiences and are good at trivia, and trivia is the center of everyday knowledge. The trivium consists of grammar, rhetoric, and logic. As far as grammar is concerned, in Genesis, the first job given to Adam is to name all things. Adam is told to name them and to have dominion over creation. Knowing the name of things gives a man authority to speak and to understand. In school, we learn to recite the alphabet, numbers and colors, and grammar involves words and meanings. The earliest lessons in speaking involve repetition and alliteration. We say tongue twisters and recite phrases to learn to speak. We say she sells seashells by the seashore, which is an articulation exercise. And children learn their own language as well as foreign languages. To learn another language, grammar and structure would appear to be essential. Grammar can be divided into technical or exegetical grammar. Technical grammar is what most of us associate with the word grammar, diagramming sentences with subjects and verbs, etc. And grammar involves learning declensions for verbs and nouns. But exegetical grammar involves learning the meaning of words, their nuances, and how they fit in different settings. We learn that differential language is appropriate to use for speaking to those in authority over us. We are told to keep a tongue of good report in the Fellowcraft charge. The Fellowcraft historical lecture directs us to have an instructive tongue so that we become better men. And grammar teaches us to speak clearly and concisely. A synonym for rhetoric is persuasion. To study rhetoric is to study speaking and writing to persuade others. Too often we think of rhetoric as unimportant, as it is a throwaway line. In other words, well, that was just a rhetorical comment. Rhetoric is serious business. It has substance. Rhetoric is essential in the study of law and regulations. Winston Churchill was a master of rhetoric and was a marvelously persuasive speaker. Influential Romans learned to speak in public and with fluency and oratory. Newly initiated entered apprentices are invited to speak in lodge on whatever was on their hearts. Public speaking is terrifying to some, but to Freemasons we learn both to speak and listen to others. Rhetoric adds force and elegance to our thoughts. As we improve in rhetoric, we captivate the hearer with both the strength of our arguments and the beauty of our expression. Our mastery of rhetoric teaches us to entreat and exhort our brethren to acts of charity. Skillful rhetoric uses tact to admonish our brothers, and rhetoric weaves praise to applaud excellence in conduct or deportment. Discussion in our lodges gives us practice in listening to train the ear. As we climb the winding stairs, we must gain mastery of our five senses. One of the moral principles taught in the Fellowcraft degree is to have an attentive ear. Listening teaches us to hear the poetry of language and word order. We know somehow that faith, hope, and charity sounds much better than charity, faith, and hope. Lodge discussions offer opportunities to explore styles of learning. Our oaths and promises are heard and repeated. We listen to historic lectures, orations, or talks on speculative masonry. The various tokens and grips in our ritual are lessons in listening. We are, will you be off or from? By listening, we hear the word and give the proper replies. As we talk and listen to each other in lodge, we grow in appreciation of debate and exhortation. We are brothers speaking to and listening to one another. Logic is the third step of the trivium. Logic directs and guides us after truth. It consists of a regular train. I should be showing you these ladies. I beg your pardon, brethren. My screen froze and I've just managed to fix it. But just to go back, these are prints from a book I have. It shows that grammar in each case is, in this case here, is a lady. And these are going back to when wisdom would be teaching the liberal arts and sciences to maidens. So I've just covered the first three. And we come to the quadrivium. We'll go back to logic. Beg your pardon for that. Screen froze, brethren, apologies. So logic is the third step of the trivium. Logic directs and guides us after truth. It consists of a regular train of argument where we deduce or infer from the facts, and logic leads us to conclusions based on our knowledge. We all use our faculties of conceiving, judging, reasoning, and disposing of questions before us. And logic trains the mind to think clearly. We are charged to be good men and true. Sincerity and plain dealing should distinguish any Freemason. Dialectics is the term used to describe critical thinking. We weigh the pros and cons to find the better choice. We observe the world. As we see patterns in relationships, we begin to make predictions using inductive reasoning. Dialectics guides us to make proofs or syllogisms. Early on, we find that you can disprove assertions easier than prove them. Reductio ad absurdum, which is not a spell from a Harry Potter film, means to find a contradiction that proves the opposite. It's easy to disprove all elephants can fly, simply finding one that can't. A single observation proves not all elephants can fly. The education of our minds includes proofs and deductive reasoning. We start to see actions that help one person may not help all. We learn to avoid arguments that something is true or false simply by who says it, instead of its inherent truth. As we advance in logic, we begin to think about proofs for the existence of God. We see the beauty of an autumn leaf, so intricate and perfect. The teleological proof of God's existence is that design in nature proves that there must have been a designer, our great architect of the universe. Grammar, rhetoric, and logic are the trivium, or the first three of the 7 liberal arts and sciences. We are charged to polish and adorn the mind by studying them. The quadrivium is associated with science and learns the mysteries of the universe. And Pythagoras is chiefly responsible for these four branches of science, which are arithmetic, geometry, music, and astronomy. The quadrivium means the four vias or paths, where four roads converge, is the center of the town or city. We leave the village of three roads and progress to a more advanced level of the city. A robust mind progresses as if roads or paths to the secret wisdom. A man then strolls along the paths of science. Arithmetic involves computation or reckoning with numbers. Ignorance of number leaves many things unintelligible. To perceive the world accurately, we need faculty with counting and measurement. Mathematics is taught step by step. We first learn to count before we learn to add and subtract. As a science, it is progressive by building skill and familiarity through frequent practice. We develop abstract operations such as addition and multiplication. A number of Masonic writers have handed down a useful moral lesson for the Freemason. The application of this science is to add to your knowledge. Never subtract from character or your neighbor. Multiply your benevolence to your fellow creatures and divide your means with those in need. Arithmetic offers a structured system. It has rules, order, and operates in terms of equations. Balance and equality are principles learned in arithmetic that should remind us to act on the level. There is a beauty in arithmetic and mathematics. We discover symmetry and proportion. Numbers fascinate us. Leonardo Fibonacci in 1201 discovered that rabbits reproduce in the series of 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, and 13. Ratios of any two successive numbers approach the golden mean, which is 1.618. The inverse of 1.618 is 0.618. The same digits reappear. The Parthenon was built in the same proportion of the length of 161.8% of the height. We feel awe and wonder at the beauty of mathematics. We find fractal patterns in biology, chemistry, and physics, and they are always repeated. The Fibonacci spiral is found in a conch shell, for example. Mathematics shows us that some propositions are right and some are wrong. It indirectly teaches us about morality. There is no moral relativity here. Geometry combines geo and metric, or earth measurement, within it. Geometry discovers unmeasured areas by comparing them to areas already measured. Geometry is synonymous with self-knowledge, the understanding of the basic substance of our being. And we all know Freemasonry places special emphasis on geometry. The tools of geometry are plumbs, squares, and levels. They are the basic tools of operative masons. We use them in speculative masonry to teach lessons of right behavior, rectitude, truthfulness. Our conductor in the fellowcraft degree leads us much like the apprentice is led by a master of his trade. The sense of seeing is developed in geometry. We grow in perceiving which structures are in order and which ones are not well arranged. We acknowledge that geometry is the foundation of architecture. Music is the sixth sense of the seven liberal arts and sciences. Pythagoras and his followers were keen on studying music as a science. Music is part of us. Our heartbeat is the basic pattern, with sounds ranging from the first cry of a newborn baby to our last gasp for breath. The sense of hearing is improved so that we recognize ditties and rhythms and syncopation. Clapping and singing are part of who we are as humans. Vibrations cause sound, and pitch is determined by the frequency of the vibrations. We learn to hear major, minor, and chromatic scales. We attempt to match the pitch of the lead singer. takes discipline, but we achieve harmony. Many have sought to hear the sounds of the universe in radio frequency. Whole pieces of music have been dedicated to the music of the spheres. Astronomy is the last in this list of arts and sciences as we contemplate the stars and planets, and yes, the great architect of the universe. Time and space seem to dwarf us. We feel tiny as we look at the Milky Way. Often it is said that the fear of God is the beginning of wisdom. Looking at the universe helps to instill both fear and a sense of the glory of the universe. The globes in the lodge teaches us to understand the rotation of the earth around the sun and the diurnal rotation of the earth. Daylight shrinks the days before December the 22nd and then begins to lengthen. We observe this. Times and seasons are understood by the contemplating astronomy. So the 7 liberal arts and sciences are branches of wisdom or learning. If we are to become better men, we should work on becoming better able to understand our world. These 7 are the keys to learning other areas of knowledge, including history and psychology. These branches are like rooms in a magnificent garden in which we should daily stroll. There is a charge to us in these 7 steps. The charge is for us to continue to be learners. Our education doesn't stop in schools or colleges. We are to continue to read the Bible, biographies, history. We should see ourselves as lifelong learners. We should better comprehend the use of music, plays, and art in our lives. We should use maths and geometry. We need to continue, even with the trivium, to expand our vocabulary and practice writings. As we persevere in learning throughout our lives, we will become better men in masonry, and moreover, better citizens of the world. Brethren, that concludes the talk. I hope you've enjoyed it, and quite happy to answer any questions you may have. Thank you, brethren.
First of all, Brother Peter Taylor, can I thank you very much for taking us on that stroll through the 7 liberal arts and sciences. It very much strikes a chord with our guests here at the Lodge Hope of Karachi Lockdown Lecture Series, because one of the things that we've been trying to promote is that daily advancement that we are instructed to do. And with us being in lockdown, this has been one way, at least on a weekly basis, that many brethren have been able to come along and continue their Masonic education. I think there are a couple of questions in the chat for you, Peter. And
I'll stop sharing now, Gordon.
Okay, thank you. Let me go to this. So there's the usual good evenings and everyone from everyone. Bill tells us it's sunny in Muffet, and then someone disagrees with that. So
very good.
And we've got someone in the Facebook Tyler's jail. So Ron Mann asks a question about the second print with Sophia and the maidens. Yes. It shows Sophia with multiple heads. Does that mean anything?
I think I'm unclear as to what it actually means, and I've not been unable to find any real information on the print other than where it came from and its dates and things like that. But I would certainly show it shows 3 heads, and I'm wondering if that has anything to do with the trivium, the grammar, rhetoric, and logic. And just because it's a 3, it may even be to try and represent Trinity of some sort, 3 again. So there are a number of things, because there are, at the very top of that print, you will see bishops and mitres and things like that. So there's obviously quite a religious aspect to this print as well, this block print. So perhaps it is leaning towards a religious connotation. So perhaps the 3 faces are representing the Trinity. But honestly, I don't know for certain.
Okay. I do have a question on some of the wooden blocks, Peter, at the beginning. You said that they were both from Germany. Have you got any thoughts on the German craftsmanship at the time and why it was important to men of knowledge in Germany at that time to put it down in such a way?
I'm thinking that, you know, some of the oldest sort of universities and teachings from in Europe came out of Northern Europe. I know we all seem to think, you know, Rome and all the rest of it, but a lot of this type of philosophical teaching came from Northern Europe, which was inspired by the you know, the revolutions that were taking place against the Catholic Church and things. So perhaps that's one of the reasons why, you know, Calvinism, Lutheranism grasped this kind of thing and tried to show that education was the way forward as far as the church was concerned. So perhaps that's the reason why a lot of this stuff came out of Northern Europe, particularly, you know, Bavaria, say Germany, whatever Germany was at that time, you know.
Yeah.
So, and we do know, going back a bit, you know, when what's his name, the Palatinate and all the rest of it, when he married King James's daughter Mary and stuff, you know. So there's a lot going in that area of the world where there was a lot of philosophical movements coming out of there. So I think that's probably the reason why these have become important and survived. So they've came from Northern Europe rather than Southern Europe, which would have been a bit more, you know, the Catholic Church would have probably suppressed a lot of this type of thing because they would have wanted to control it, you know.
Okay. I've got a really interesting question for you from Alan Keegan. I'm not going to read out his suggestions just yet, but Peter, if you, or any of us really, were to update the 7, what would you add?
Well, this is the thing. This is the thing, you know, the question that I've tried to ask through that, you know, why did they pick that 7 rather than something else? You know, because we could have picked economics, you know, 1,000 years ago, because, you know, money was still a big problem and a big thing 1,000 years ago. We could have had history, because ancient history, you know, I mean, if you talk to any of our Greek brethren here, they will tell you now that Greek mythology is not Greek mythology. Greek mythology is history. As far as they're concerned, you know, it is part of their history. So we could have had that as one of the 7 liberal arts and sciences. But I think these, when you use these are the ones that allow you to get into other things. So in other words, we use arithmetic, you know, to be able to count and do mathematics. You're not going to be able to do economics unless you have got a good understanding of how to count, add, subtract, do the mathematics. So I think a lot of the things like history, economics, and other subjects basically require the first 7 or combinations of these 7 before you can make that progress. But there is a question: why did they pick those 7? And I think it's because, you know, you need arithmetic before you can do economics, for example. You need to be able to read and understand text before you can delve into history or philosophy. So I think it's grammar first before you need anything else, for example.
Thank you, Peter. Well, Brian, there's a little challenge for you. Put your thinking caps on and put your own suggestions on the Facebook page this evening and see what other ones we can come up with. Tom Edgar, Peter, thanks very much, brother Peter. Food for thought. This would be a good way to explain a part of what Freemasonry is to prospective candidates. What's your thoughts on that? Using the trivium, etc., to talk to someone who doesn't know anything about us and wants to join.
Well, I think so. I think so. I think you know, from Grand Lodge through Provincial Grand Lodge through the lodges, we need to have some kind of new structure of how do we make Freemasonry attractive? How do we tell prospective candidates what we really are all about? And I'm not saying the 7 liberal arts and sciences is the only thing that we're about, but I think it is a big part of it. So, whatever strategy we will adopt in the future, we need to include this type of thing in our CV, if you like. This is what we're about. This is what we expect you, when you come to Freemasonry and you join, the 7 liberal arts and sciences. We don't have to package it up as grammar, rhetoric, logic, etc., arithmetic, in so many words. But self-learning and self-research and improving your abilities and your faculties should be part of what we tell prospective candidates is expected of them, I think. So, we'll see what happens. I know Grand Lodge is looking at it. I'm looking at it myself in Forfarshire. And I know other provincial Grand Masters have got similar thoughts. So I honestly agree that this type of thing should be part of what we're saying to prospective candidates. We expect self-learning, we expect research, we expect you to be involved, we expect you to ask questions, For too long, I think, and I'll be quite blunt, we've had people join us and they're really only interested in getting cheap drink. So there you go, I said it.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks for that, and thanks for being so candid there. As you are aware, Peter, I think that the working parties from the Grand Lodge of Scotland, or one of them in particular, was looking at some of these challenges, and they will be going to Grand Committee in due course, and hopefully from that will be further disseminated to them. Interestingly, well, I think it's interesting anyway, and since I've got the mic, Brian, I'll share an extension of that point. In the Prestonian lecture in 1984 was by a chap called Harry Mendoza. He was a past master of Quarter Coronati, and the lecture was entitled Getting and Giving Masonic Knowledge, and be always ready to give or to receive instruction. And I think that ties in really neatly to what Peter's talking there. But as part of that lecture, he asked the Grand Secretary of the United Grand Lodge, and I'll just read it verbatim, Brian, General, other constitutions. Our Grand Secretary was kind enough to write on my behalf to his counterparts in the following Grand Lodges, selected by him, asking them to give me what information they could on the subject of Masonic education in their jurisdictions. They are here listed in order of seniority: Ireland, Scotland, New York, Texas, Canada and the province of Ontario, South Australia, New South Wales, Victoria, New Zealand, Western Australia, Alberta. It's not claimed, nor is it intended to give the impression that these 11 Grand Lodges are representative of the whole. They govern barely 10% of the regular craft. Though it should be pointed out that some of them acknowledge the help they have had from other Grand Lodges in devising their Masonic education programs. In passing, however, one might mention that some well-known public opinion polls have been shown to be fairly accurate in their findings on such a sample. A positive attitude. The general impression gained is that in all but 2 cases, the Grand Lodges showed a great concern for getting and giving Masonic knowledge in its widest sense. The 2 exceptions were Ireland and Scotland. So, Brian, hopefully what comes out of the Grand Master Masons working parties changes the view that Harry Mendoza found about our Grand Lodge in 1984. But I do think things like this and talks that Peter's given this evening really give us some food for thought on how we keep that new Mason interested and takes away our retention problem. So certainly, Tom, coming back to you, food for thought. Peter Rolf, he'll touches Rolf lives in Germany. He's German, yeah. And as far as I know, the picture was Rosicrucian. May we see it again, please?
Sure. So you go. Should have just went back at the beginning. Is that the one we want to see?
Rolf, is that the one you're talking about? If Rolf's still with us, or is he? Rolf, do you want to unmute? And
yes, I think this picture, and can I have a look on the next one?
That one.
That one, yeah. Later on, I checked my library. I'm pretty sure these are pictures from a Rosicrucian context.
It probably is, because we believe Rosicrucianism and much of this thinking came out of Germany, shall we say, or that area. Yes. in Northern Europe. So yes, could well be.
So I'm checking my library later on, and if I can provide further information about it,
please do
in the chat.
Please do.
Thanks, Rolf. Peter, if you don't know Rolf, I'll connect you
afterwards. Yes, I do. I'm friends with Rolf on Facebook. Yes. We've known each other, so I'll
since a long time.
Share it again. Yeah, for a long time. Yeah.
Showing your ages there, Brian.
Burn suppers.
Yeah.
Alan Turton, what a wonderfully crafted talk in your presentation, exemplifying the subject. Dan Barlow, one of the first to categorize human knowledge. Oh, Dan, this is one of our St Andrews, Brian. It's a big word for me coming from the middle of Fife. Epistemologically, how does that sound, Brian? Was Varro in the 1st century BC. He included the 7 we know, plus architecture and medicine. Capella picked up the first 7 of these, but excluded the last 2. Architecture would perhaps be encompassed by geometry, but why do we think Capella and later Cassiodorus only wanted 7? Prime number, so indivisible, question mark.
Maybe there is something in the number 7. 7 occurs, we know it occurs in the Bible, and it occurs in various other things. It is a prime number, but I mean, again, architecture is that a byproduct of geometry? Medicine, do we need mathematics, etc., to lead towards? I don't know. So, but yeah, it could well be 9. So there's no reason why it should be 9. I don't know if there's a specific reason why it should be exactly 7. But you're maybe right. It is a number that can't be divided by anything else. It's a unique number, if you like. So,
and that's then followed up with Dick and Sandbach. 7 is associated with perfection.
Yep.
And Brian, I think that's the last in the chat this evening, and is possibly the best comment to end on, because the 7 liberal arts and sciences should lead us all to that perfection in our Masonic careers. Brother Peter Taylor, once again, thank you so much for coming along and giving us this presentation. Well, there's a comment from your historian from your province, so we better read that out, or Ian will shout at you or me.
You'd better, because that Macintosh lad is, he gets a hud or something, you want to let it go. A dog with a bone.
No, but I think Ian Macintosh and I, we're both past subbies, and that's the best office to have, isn't it, Ian?
Past subby.
The list of the 7 liberal sciences from the Dundee manuscript of 1659. Oh, he's got me going in this Dundee talk. For there be soon liberal sciences, of which soon it is on them, and the names of the soon science be these: the first is grammar, and that teacheth a man to speak truly and write truly, and the second is rhetoric, and that teacheth a man to speak fair and simple terms, and the third is dialectic, and that teaches a man to discern or know truth from falsehood, and the fourth is arithmetic, and that teaches a man to recount and count all manner of numbers, and that the 5th is geometry, and that teaches a man and measure or earth and all other things, of which science called geometry, and the 6th science is called music, and that teaches a man the knowledge of song and ways of tongue and organ, harp or trump. And the seventh science is called astronomy, and that teaches a man to know the course of the sun and of the moon and of the stars. No wonder you talk about ingenians and all and roundabouts and circles and things with writing like that, Brian.
When is he going to learn English though? That's what you want to know, eh?
So, Ian, thank you very much for adding that back in. And again, it lays claim for a good Masonic pedigree in Dundee going back all those years.
And I'm just watching Alan Keegan's the 8th liberal art and science is obviously to speak like Ur Wally.
So I'd say another enjoyable evening of Masonic education. Thanks, Gordon, especially you, Brother Peter. EO, yeah, good to see you back as well.
Yes, it's good to see everybody, and hopefully we'll get back to physical meetings properly and we can all start meeting up again.
So, and again, finally, however, Peter's talk on the 7 liberal arts reminds me of our life of study and learning as we traverse through life-rich tapestry, which as Masons we hope to strive to do. So once again, Peter, on behalf of the Lodge Hope of Karachi and our lockdown lecture series, thank you so much for coming along here this evening and giving us that little stroll. Brian, as I said at the top of the show, we will be continuing our lockdown lecture series. I have confirmed a few speakers over September and October, but I am still waiting for confirmation of next week's speakers. But I will put it up on the Facebook as soon as possible. Thank you all for coming along and for supporting us. For those of you who can get back to face-to-face meetings over the next few weeks, please enjoy them, but please be safe and follow the government guidance. I would rather you come and watch me and our speakers rather than catch the Rona. Brian, please unmute yourself, say your thank yous to Brother Peter Taylor and your good nights to each other.
Well done, Peter. Thank you very much. Most interesting.
Really good information, Brother Peter. Really enjoyed it.
Interesting.
Thank you, Brother Peter.
Thank you, Peter.
Next week.
Hope see you next week. Good night.
Thank you, Brother Peter, and good evening to everyone.
Thanks very much. If I can help out anytime, Gordon.
Stay safe, everyone.
Thanks, Peter.
Thanks, Brother Peter, and thank you, Gordon, and good night, everybody.
Cheers, man.
Thank you.
Brother Peter, most enlightening. Thank you.
And 5, Brian.
Thank you very much, Peter. That was really enlightening as well.
Thank you, Peter and Gordon, and good night, brethren all.
Thanks, Robert. Thank you.
Brother Peter, that was absolutely wonderful. Thank you.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
Good night, brethren.
Thank you, Brother Peter. Very interesting talk.
All right, Rolf, we'll catch up. See you soon.
See you.
And 3, Brian.
Let's go and try to show you knows arithmetic backwards.
Gosh, I know, yeah. I was educated well, and 2.
Good night. Good night. Thanks, Peter. Good night. Good night.
And 1, Brian. Thank you so much, Brother Peter Taylor, on behalf of everyone here at the Lodge Hope of Karachi.